It is 6 o'clock p.m. I call this meeting of the Miami Township Board of Trustees to order. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mr. Posey,
Present.
Mr. Berry,
Here.
Mr. Culp,
Here. Chief McCarty, you have the reading of casualties.
Good evening, Board. I do have the reading of casualties for March 19th, 2025 to March 31st, 2025. Sergeant Grant Candice, from the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office in Louisiana, March 23rd, 2025. And Police Officer Osmar Rodart of the Marysville Police Department, California, end of watch, March 26, 2025.
Please join us in a moment of silence for those fallen first responders. Thank you. We actually do have a guest in presentation today, Mr. Menier. We will be discussing the ratification of the Montgomery County Solid Waste Management Plan.
Good evening, Mr. President, trustees, member of staff. Thank you for having me this evening. My name is John Menier. I'm the Assistant Director for Environmental Services for Montgomery County. Again, thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. I'm not going to take much of your time. Have basically a brief overview of what the plan is, why we're doing this, and then some of the changes of this plan to the last. So that's going to kind of cover my talk tonight. The Solid Waste Management District is required every 5 years to do a plan update. That plan is required by statute. The Solid Waste District was created by Montgomery County Commissioners in 1989, whereas they had to begin writing a solid waste management plan. The statute sets forth some guidelines of what has to be in that plan, and it has to marry up with the state solid waste management plan. There are two primary goals of the solid waste management plan. One is we must guarantee that there be disposal capacity for the businesses and residents of Montgomery County for a period of 20 years. How we do that is entering into either contract and or working with the local landfills to determine how much capacity they have left during that time. If we don't feel we have sufficient capacity based on their existing permits, then we go out and seek contractual relationships. We have a contractual relationship with Rumpke, and we also know that Waste Management, based on their current permit with Ohio EPA, they have indicated based on their current volumes, they have approximately 24 years left in that landfill. That's based on current volumes. So we meet that goal. The other goal is that we must reduce the waste stream for residential and commercial, and that's a combined goal of 25%. We basically did some deep dives into our analytics for a number of years. We were always stuck at 23%. So during this plan process, we really started digging a little bit deeper because it wasn't making sense that we weren't meeting those goals. Based on some of my historical background on this, Montgomery County's got everything in position to be able to meet that goal. So I was just curious as to why. So bottom line is, I asked for all of the surveys that our consultant had dug up over the past years and then this year, and found out that one of our major processors of material here in Montgomery County had reported correctly their tonnages, but they misallocated some of them. They reported them all as industrial, which ends up hurting, of course, our commercial goals. So I met with them, talked with them, asked them, don't change anything if they're not supposed to be changed. But if some of this is commercial, please look into it. They did. They sent us back their new revised numbers for those commercial rates, which was where we found the error. And then we also ran across a couple other processors that had not been reporting at all. And they had agreed to start reporting. So now we're at about 25.6%, meeting those state goals. And based on our projections throughout the plan period, we will continue to meet that goal as well. The process that we're in right now is called the ratification stage. And what that basically means is that we have had a long period of having our solid waste financial advisory committee meet. They look at all of our revenues, all of our programs, all of our expenses, and they also have to project our budgets for 20 years. Keep in mind, we update it every 5, but we have to project for 20. So we presented some scenarios to them, and they reviewed those, making recommendations to our solid waste policy committee. The policy committee is the recommending body for the plan. Basically, during this process, they are in full charge of what we do. So we updated the plan with the new projections, with the new budget, and it was projected that in 2026 we were going to have a shortfall in our revenues. For the longest time, Montgomery County had been using a balance, cash balance that they had to fund the plan, and that fund balance finally ran out. The last fee increase was in 2010. It went from $2 to $3 at that time. So the Financial Advisory Committee, in order to comply with the plan, they have to show that the plan is adequately funded for the 20 years. So they met, they discussed, they made the recommendation to the Solid Waste Policy Committee that we increase our fees. And the fees will be increased if the plan is ratified by 65 cents a ton. Now, what does that translate into to your residents? Because I'm sure your residents and businesses are the ones that you're most concerned about. Basically, every resident in Montgomery County, on average, this varies, of course, from house to house, depending on, if you're just you and your wife, like in my household, or if it's a family of 6. But the average household generates about a ton of garbage a year. So what that means to them is their rate is going to go up 65 cents a year, or around 5 cents every month. That fee, if again the plan is approved, that fee will be a pass-through. I've reviewed your contract. You do have that language in there, as well as allowing up to 10% administrative fees to be added on. That's your determination whether you do that or not. Not every community has that provision. I congratulate you for doing it. It is a fair and responsible thing to do, because when government passes along those fees, it ends up eroding the margins of a private sector contract. So it's very thoughtful and professional of you to offer such a provision in your contract. The ratification process that we're in right now, basically, I've got to go out to all the communities and do what I'm doing tonight, presenting the plan, presenting the changes, and then asking you to, by resolution, ratify the plan. We are required in the plan to get 70% approval by population. The reason why it used to be we needed 60%, but this plan in about the 12th year increases the fee up to $5 a ton. In 2026, the fee will be 65 cents. The Financial Advisory Committee made a determination that rather than having these large increases at given point of time, to do a percentage increase each and every year, which is 6%. So the fee will go up 6% or basically 22 cents each year thereafter. That basically allows us to continue the programs that we operate, the household hazardous waste program, the tires, the grant program that we provide to communities and businesses, and the recycling programs that we offer on the campus over at the transfer station and recycling facility. Other than that, those are the major changes. I will be asking respectfully that you consider ratifying the solid waste management plan, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Thank you for your thorough presentation and the materials you provided. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion and one vote of consent. There will be no separate discussion of those items. If a discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. I move that we approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Posey,
Aye.
Mr. Barry,
Aye.
Mr. Culp,
Aye.
Mr. Schweikert, you have new business, Resolution 30-2025.
The sole person for business tonight, but Resolution 30-2025 is to create an intergovernmental agreement. This is between the Miami Crossing JED and Miami Township Parks Department. This is somewhat similar to the intergovernmental agreement that we just passed with Austin Center JED. However, that was to provide contract services, where this is actually maintenance service. The Miami Crossing JED has some territory off Vienna Parkway, the little right-of-way extension, and then a 3-acre parcel across from Vienna Springs. And they have a need to get a landscape and have maintenance services. We found that it does not hinder our operations if we were to take this on, and we would generate some revenue. In the contract language is not to exceed $10,500 that would be deposited back into the Parks Fund. However, there's features and clauses in there that we would approach the Crossing JED if additional service was needed. But this agreement was reviewed by our law director, and there's no additional changes necessary at this time, and happy to answer any questions about this.
Any questions?
Thank you so much, Board.
Thank you, Mr. Schweikert. Moving on to public comments. Is anyone wishing to come forward for the public comment portion of the meeting, where you're invited to share your thoughts with the board? Seeing no one, we'll move into consideration of resolutions and motions. I make a motion we adopt Resolution 30-2025, a resolution to create an intergovernmental agreement for the enhancement maintenance services with the Austin Center JED. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Posey,
Aye.
Mr. Barry,
Aye.
Mr. Culp,
Aye.
Department head comments. Chief McCarty.
No comments today, Board. Thank you.
Mr. Schweikert.
Good evening, Board. I wanted to recognize the 2 new Public Works foremans for you tonight. John Taylor is road foreman. He's in his 11th year with Miami Township, and he has dedicated his career to professional growth. He has recently completed the Road Scholar 1 curriculum from the Ohio Department of Transportation and multiple other leadership courses. He promotes team building and has the mindset of quality repairs to the critical infrastructure the road department manages. His advanced technical skills and dedication to performance will elevate this department. Just a few recent activities that he's done in the short month that he's been road foreman. He's reviewed and completed the catch basin repair list, which is basically, part of our stormwater maintenance program. He's currently working with staff on rural ditch cleaning program. We're about halfway through. He's trained 2 staff to do roadside mowing program. He's also reviewing it with the road supervisor to see if we can make the schedule a little bit more efficient. He's also added some assets to our new OpenGov software system, and him and the street supervisor are working on new, it's called OOPS procedures, where you do utility locates, to have a policy for public works staff. So thank you, Mr. Taylor. The other gentleman is Grant Short. He's our new parks foreman. Grant Short has been with us for 5 years and came from Lunny Landscaping, where he was a working foreman and worked on landscape design. Grant is a dedicated professional who embodies the community service and promotes the township image. His hard work, ethic, enthusiasm, and positive aptitude will be a huge contribution to enhancing this department. A few things that he's been working on since becoming parks foreman: he led the annual spring mulch program here at the administration campus and at Public Works. He's also helped staff. They built 4 of the handicap accessible picnic tables. 2 of them are installed, one at Waldron and one at Cranes Run Park. He's actively working on blueprints for a new landscaping design to be installed out on Stroop Road median and here at the administration building. He's also working on making the mow schedule for around the township a little bit more efficient with the park supervisor, and is actively working on assets, park assets in our new OpenGov software system. So just wanted to introduce both foremans. Definitely proud to have both of them in their place and look forward to the exciting opportunities that lie ahead. Thank you, Board.
Mr. Schweikert. Mr. Carlson.
Yes, Board, good evening. Just a quick comment to sort of follow Mr. Schweikert's comments about John and Grant's promotion, and wanted to highlight one of the key things this has allowed us to do, Mr. Schweikert and myself. Something we've prioritized for a long time in our departments and working with the township administrators to be more aggressive in pursuing grant opportunities, both in our county, around the state, and federally. By having John and Grant promoted in these positions, Park Supervisor Rex Gore, Street Supervisor Junior Cope, John, myself, and Senior Planner Max McConnell have stood up a monthly meeting where we are reviewing all current grant applications, status updates, and all future grant applications to make sure we're staying on top of all these dollar opportunities that are out there, many of which sometimes require 6 months to a year planning ahead of time, which when we're short-staffed, as we sort of were before, we get to an application deadline and say, but we don't have the time to even prepare for this. So being able to look out now further ahead, we're looking at grant opportunities already for 2030, 2031, which is very exciting. So just appreciate the board's promotion of these staff members, creation of this department position, and being able to work with Public Works Department on the parks and roads has just been really exciting. So just want to say thank you to the board.
Great. Mr. McConnell, anything to add? Thank you. Mr. McCord, any comments?
I don't have any tonight, sir. Thanks.
Administrator Snyder?
Just to, again, add my thanks to all the Public Works, Parks workers and Parks and Public Works for all the work you've been doing around the facilities here, getting mulch down, starting to clean up in the parks this spring. It definitely doesn't go unnoticed. I always enjoy seeing how much better things start to look once all of your crews get out there in the spring, and how much better our facilities start looking as you were able to get in there and start cleaning things up from the winter. So thank you again.
Great. We're going to take the rest of the meeting a little bit out of order, so I'll excuse our guests, anyone not wishing to stay for the business parts of the meeting. You're free to leave at this point, and I would probably encourage you to do so unless you're interested in learning about cannabis law. Thank you. At this time, I make a motion to enter into work session to discuss adult use cannabis. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion?
Mr. Posey,
Aye.
Mr. Berry, Mr. Culp,
Aye.
Mr. Carlson?
Good evening, Board. I wanted to bring back in a work session the topic of adult use cannabis, previously discussed in the December 4th, 2024 work session. As we were looking through our notes today, it was hard to believe that that was already 5 months ago, but a lot has happened and a lot has changed since that last work session, so we wanted to prepare comments both on what the board requested of staff in the interim and also some of the other changes that we have discussed with our legal counsel. So quickly, we previously discussed Miami Township election results and our survey results. Conducted a survey asking residents, business owners, their feelings on this land use. It generally lined up with the election results of the unincorporated Miami Township. 59% in favor on the survey, 57% percent. At the state level, we were about 60% on the survey in favor of the land use. We discussed our draft definition of adult use cannabis, what zoning districts would be acceptable, and additional standards that the board felt would help best regulate this land use. Two of the key requests that we took back to legal were whether or not we could require single tenancy, so only be a single tenant in a building, and second, whether we could require that building, lighting, and landscape design be met for current conforming standards. So we did work with legal to come up with some answers on that. So since then, quickly, we did send a memo summarizing these questions for Frost Brown Todd, and staff, more importantly, has been monitoring a lot of changes at the State House. There's been a flurry of activity at our State House, many of which have small components of the larger bill pointing at adult use cannabis. One we'll talk about in a moment, House Bill 96 is the nearest, but there are about 5 more that are in committee at some level discussing cannabis. So there's a lot going on with this right now. And we did receive a memo from Frost Brown. So House Bill 96 is currently in front of the governor. This is language we took directly from OTA's website. Again, the most immediate changes to adult use cannabis land use. The first one being, we discussed in our meeting the community host fee, 36% of a 10% excise tax that would come back to the township. House Bill 96 is proposing removal of that community host fee altogether. Those funds would instead go toward county jail efforts, so those are being diverted. I will also say there are 3 other bills in committee that would again change this, but this is the one that's furthest along and immediately in front of the governor. And then adult use regulatory authority. This is another large one. So House Bill 96 in front of the governor would theoretically take place July 1st of this year for the biennial budget. This would eliminate the township's ability to prohibit or limit the operations of adult use cultivator, processor, or dispensary. So on one hand, they're taking away the ability to regulate it, but then on the other, they're taking away the community host fee that's going back to the community. So we've tried to talk to OTA to see if we can learn a little more about the intentionality of House Bill 96 related to adult use cannabis, and we're not getting a very clear answer on sort of what the goal is at the state level. Again, one hand theoretically allowing more, but then also saying, well, then you don't get the community host fee. So anyway, felt these are both important measures within House Bill 96. The other sort of sub-item of the second being any language we put into place now under House Bill 96 current language would stand. So if we put in additional regulations on land use, if we were to permit it, or if we were to prohibit it now, whatever path we take, that will stand under House Bill 96. So looking at sort of the 2 routes, working with Frost Brown Todd, staff has put together these sort of 2 paths. If we were to allow the land use in the B3 business zoning district, here's a path. And if we were to decide to prohibit, there's a way to do that as well. So based on comments from the board at the work session, we have looked at, if we were to allow this in the B3 business district, what changes did Frost Brown Todd have? First being separately defining the 3 types of cannabis land use into dispensary, processor, and cultivator, as well as a definition for odor control technology, something they've seen used elsewhere. This would have cannabis dispensary listed as a conditional use. So this would go to our Board of Zoning Appeals and would allow for greater scrutiny on things like requiring conformity with building design, lighting, landscaping, requiring that they are located in a single tenant building, requiring or at least doubling down on the state's standard for 500 feet building to building for protected land uses, that's schools, churches, so on and so forth, parks. And then we have added no closer than 1,500 feet from parcel to parcel for other cannabis dispensaries. This is just one more way to create a buffer zone within our township zoning. Talking with Max has been talking with DCC, Department of Cannabis Control. They have sort of a self-imposed 1 mile regulation as they're allowing licensures. They're dropping sort of a 1 mile buffer, so they're not allowing too much concentration, but that's not codified. That's just a sort of policy at DCC level, so we wanted some measure of buffering as well. And then the other option, again, if we were to look at prohibiting, there is a way that the Township Board of Trustees can just prohibit the land use by resolution. It's not even necessarily a text amendment, it's just a blanket resolution. So that was a lot of information, and wanted to talk with the board how they prefer we proceed. If we were to allow this land use, the board could have a case filed with the zoning commission that would then come back in a public hearing for this board of trustees to review our zoning resolution amendment. Or if we were to prohibit, we could bring back a resolution to the board, you read the resolution, pass it, and that would immediately prohibit the land use.
I'm about to ask a complicated legal question and probably going to need another memo on it later, but
May look that way as well.
what I would be interested in is a triggering zoning resolution that we allow it subject to the conditions unless the host fee is eliminated, at which point it rescinds and goes back to a full moratorium. But how we would deal with existing use at that point would be a challenge unless we end up, again, I am stating this off the top of my head, requiring, as part of that decision to allow, requiring a contract that results in the function of the host fee if one is not present. If our zoning regulation can, for permission of this activity, require that you're paying the equivalency of the host fee, if not the actual host fee.
I believe 96 had language, again, this is just me reading it again today, that explicitly prohibited local jurisdictions from leveraging any kind of separate, but I will let the lawyers.
Yeah, and this is part of the challenge with the General Assembly really kind of pulling the rug on this, and then there's other competing bills. Are you familiar with how many licenses are expected to be maintained in the county, Montgomery County anyway?
I know it's 350 in the state.
Our understanding when we last put up the goal was
One more license in the county.
Any other thoughts?
But if we prohibit it now, we get grandfathered in if whatever happens with all these other.
I think that's the encouragement of the I think that's the encouragement of the new bill, is trying to promote prohibition because you won't be able to regulate it. The question is whether we agree with that or not, given the survey and the voter support for the measure as it passed.
And we're still really only looking at, what, 2 or 3 sites in the township that would fit within that zoning regulation?
So in the B3 zoning district right now, and this is a public record, but we have been provided staff level letters from interested users of adult use cannabis dispensaries. They've pinged a couple of sites around the township that they've sort of asked, would this be viable under state regulation? We basically are just saying that we are the local zoning authority and that right now we have no specific regulation other than a prohibition on medical marijuana. One of those sites being the Fuji Grill out here on Kings Ridge. One being the Dayton Shops where, trying to think who's in there, Buddy's Flooring and things like that, but that would be a multi-tenant, so theoretically that, if we were to pass this, that would not be a viable site, but that's sort of the area that they've really been leaning toward is the Kings Ridge Drive sort of corridor.
The only other consideration at this point is that our medical marijuana prohibition is kind of a poison pill anyway, because most of the applicants only want to open dual use. So they're not going to open, they may not open recreational only. Staff have any recommendations at this point?
So I think at this point, I think it's fair to say that prohibition now is likely the safe answer given all the potential changes at the state level. On the other hand, by not getting some of these additional regulations in now under a conditional use, if we were to decide in the future that we want to allow it as a conditional use, they're stripping away then the ability to additionally regulate. So some of the things we want, like conformity with our codes or increased proximity buffers or single tenancy in the buildings, we might lose the ability to enter those later. It's either permitted use or it's not. That would be probably my largest concern if we were to go prohibition and say we don't want it at all, but we might in the future. If that makes sense.
Any other thoughts? Anybody feel the need to push an action at this point?
No, we have till July.
I suggest another work session in May to see if there's any moving parts, and if you can get an answer to my question.
Okay. Can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson.
Thank you, board.
I move to close the work session on adult cannabis at 6:30. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Posey,
Aye.
Mr. Berry,
Aye.
Mr. Culp,
Aye.
Continuing things out of order, I move into executive session for a conference with an attorney for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are the subject of pending or imminent court action in accordance with revised code section 121.22G3. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Posey,
Aye.
Mr. Berry,
Aye.
Mr. Culp.
Aye.
We will be continuing our executive session in the conference room. We may or may not return to this room to conclude the meeting, but further business would only be taken after we exit executive session. We have exited the executive session at 7:02 and returned to the regular work session. I will make a motion at this time. Whereas in March 2025, Fiscal Officer Bob Matthews attempted to cause a transfer of township funds in order to purchase gold coins at a price of over 4.1% over spot and encouraging a storage fee of over 0.35% of the value of the stored material annually in the express absence of approval by the Board of Trustees. And whereas the Township Fraud and Accounting Controls caught the transaction, which was canceled, and whereas on Mr. Matthews on March 31st, 2025, made efforts to terminate Finance Director Clay McCord for his participation in canceling the transaction, I hereby move to authorize Township Counsel Frost Brown Todd to pursue, first, a report to the Auditor of State pursuant to Revised Code 507.13 and any other applicable statutes. 2, a referral for criminal prosecution for the same conduct. And 3, I'm filing a declaratory judgment action to determine whether Mr. Matthews' attempted actions are within the course and scope of his statutory authority as fiscal officer. I separately move to bar Mr. Matthews from the township offices except as required for the necessary performance of his statutorily defined duties and pursuant to prearranged communication with Administrator Snyder or Finance Director McCord. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Posey,
Aye.
Mr. Berry,
Aye.
Mr. Culp.
Aye.
I adjourn the meeting at 7:05 PM.